Hello and welcome to History of the Pacific Northwest. As you may have noticed, today's episode looks a little bit different, and that's because I am doing my first interview with author Mike Nolan, whose book Hardhat Days, My Reeducation in Seattle Shipyards, is out now. And let me tell you right away, you guys need to read this book. It is a wonderful memoir about Mike's time working in the Seattle shipyards in the late 1970s, where he learned many lessons about hard work, determination, and just what it takes to make it in a blue-collar world. Mike and I are going to talk about a lot of the themes of his book and some specific key moments that meant a lot to him. And we're going to talk a little bit about the blue-collar world in general and maybe even a little bit about life. So tune in, and I hope you enjoy today's interview. And hey, Mike,
Hi,
how you doing?
I'm good. Good. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Of course, it's a pleasure. I was really happy you reached out. I really enjoyed your book.
Oh,
So
thank you.
first off, tell everyone who you are and tell everyone what your book is.
Okay. My name's Mike Nolan. I'm new to writing. I've taken this up as a retirement hobby, and I've stuck with it and actually turned out a book, which is finally published. Um, it has to do. It's a memoir, and it has to do with my time in the Seattle shipyards working as a sandblaster, as a laborer. Um, and I think the themes of the book you'd probably say would be resilience and reinvention. That's
Yeah, I
what I
like
look
that.
at, and how I grew through that. It was a real pivotal time for me, and I don't know that I realized that at the moment when you're just working hard and making a paycheck. But looking back, no, that was definitely a pivotal time for me.
Right. Yeah. Do we ever notice the pivotal moment when we're in the middle of it?
If only, it's funny too because everybody everybody in the shipyard used to always say, "Well, I'm not here for my love of shipbuilding." That
Right.
was
Yeah.
a common rejoinder. I'm not here for my love of shipbuilding. And the implication being you're just there for a paycheck. But looking back, I can say I got much more than a paycheck out of it. I really grew.
Yeah, that
Um,
was that was a big rejoinder, and also I was looking for a job when I got here, and I'll be looking for a job tomorrow, right?
and that's since you don't have any control over that, and you don't know if there's a next ship. I mean, you hope you get transferred to the next ship. You hope there is a next ship.
Yeah.
But all you can say is, "Hey, I was looking for a job when I came here, and I'm going to be looking for a job when I go."
So yeah, I really enjoyed the book, and you know, it spoke to me in a lot of ways. I felt really connected to the book in a big way, and so yeah. First off, let me just say I think I think a lot of people need to read this book. I really do. Um, and I think especially a lot of young people need to read this book. So especially those who find themselves like at the same time in their life as you did when you got to the shipyard. So
Sure.
kids who are just either they're finishing college or they're about to, or even if they're just in their early 20s and they don't have a clue what to do or where to go.
Yes.
I think that this book is big for that. And you know, like I said, it spoke to me in a big way because I grew up around construction. My dad was a
Hmm.
contractor,
Hmm.
and so I went to school and I became a teacher. And so at the end of your journey, you become a guidance counselor. So,
Yes, I was in
uh,
the school.
and then I ended up switching because when my wife and we started having kids,
Hmm.
I went back to construction because it was kind of the only good paying job that I could find. So
Hmm.
I was sort of like you, where you were fresh out of college and you're applying to every job you can find and you can't even get a phone call. And then I
Yeah.
got into construction, and then I became a contractor. So now I own my own business, but
Hmm.
there was a need for it. There's certainly a vacuum in the world of construction that uh,
Hmm.
is eager for people to step into.
So
Um,
you could relate to this journey I was on.
Big time, big time. So yeah, let's get into kind of the beginning of it. So you went to Gonzaga University, right? And you were a
Yes.
biology major.
Yes. Science
And
major.
uh, as people may have already guessed, you were not graduating and thinking, I'm going to move to Seattle and I am going to join the Ship Scalers Union.
True. Yes. When I look back on my education, the 4-year bachelor's degree, I think the most significant thing I got out of that was a love of learning, and that's stuck with me my whole life. Um, but the most significant thing I got out of the master's degree when I went back to school was a direct ticket to a job, and I mean job training. And I guess that's one of the issues in the book. I just talk about it, at least in a roundabout way, is just education and the applicability of that.
Yeah.
And you do need to be looking ahead, young people, and having your plans, but having a plan B and a plan C too, because I didn't, and boy, it doesn't take long to be broke. I mean, I went to Seattle. I moved to Seattle, and I was just so enthusiastic and high energy. And of course, you're coming off. Hey, I was a good student. I got good grades. I had evidence, that I was qualified. But you're just starting from the beginning. And I was sleeping on my sister's couch at her home up on Beacon Hill. I had borrowed my mother's car. My dad loaned me $400 so I could get started. And it didn't take very many weeks of job hunting to work my way through that and just be broke and desperate. And all that confidence you had from being a student and being so good at being a student, it didn't serve you exactly. There wasn't anything you could do with it. And you got to remember, this was during the Carter administration. The economy was on its hind legs. It was really hard. It was really hard to get a job. So, yes, I ended up signing on as a laborer. And Ryan, even that, when I started as a laborer, I was being sent from the union hall out to ship repair. You can be sent to new construction, which is wonderful if you get on it early, because you could be on a job a year or two. It could take a couple of years to build, a frigate or a battleship, or you could be sent to ship repair. And I was always sent to ship repair. And those jobs, my gosh, they last 2 days, 3 days, because whoever's got that boat, tied up to the pier or up on dry dock, they're losing money every hour. It's not doing what boats are supposed to do. And so we're working around the clock to get it out of there and get it going, which is great money for 2 days. But if that only happens, if you're only working 2 or 3 days a week, you can't string it together. You have this good paying job and you're still not making it. And that's what happened to me after, a few weeks. And I thought, this just isn't working. I finally got in here. And that's what led to me becoming a sandblaster. I was in the Ship Scalers Union, and that's a laborers union. And I knew that a small group of the workers within that union were sandblasters. I didn't know how they were trained or how you became one. You could see these guys in the yard. They were hard to miss because of the gear they wore and the job they did. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how to latch onto that. But I was working on a Washington State ferry, me and a couple other guys, and we were doing a job that you could see the writing on the wall. We're going to get laid off that night. We were tearing up deck paper, which is the last thing you do, to clean up the ship before you turn it back over to the Washington State ferries. And the lead man came by just 20, 30 minutes into the shift and said, "Hey, are any of you guys sandblasters?" And I looked at the other two guys, and then I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, me. I can sandblast." And Ryan, I couldn't look at the other guys. I was sure the other guys would say, "What are you talking about? You're not a sandblaster," So I didn't look at the other guy. I just stared at the lead man. And he looked at me, and he looked at the time card, and he looked at me, and he said, So you're a blaster?" And by then, I was already committed. I was already getting good at lying. And I said, "Yeah, I can sandblast." And so he said, "Well, come with me." And he took me off the ship, and we went down the pier, and we went down to the next pier, and there was a dry dock with a big barge, a 200-foot barge on it. And there was a group of sandblasters there. And he said, "Okay, you guys have a complete crew now. Here's your last guy." And there I was, and that's how I started as a sandblaster. And I didn't. It's incredible that I didn't hurt myself or somebody else, actually, because it's dangerous work. And I didn't know anything about it. I just didn't want to keep getting laid off. I just wanted a job.
Well, and that's probably why they made you pull the hose, right? Because they're like,
oh yeah,
this guy can't hurt us pulling the hose.
Hopefully, but even that,
hopefully,
you have to what you're doing, and you have to, you have to get these guys to, because they could have said, "Hey, get rid of this guy." What's he doing? Get somebody who knows their way around sandblasting.
Well, and of course, like the moment they saw you, they knew you weren't a sandblaster. Like these guys, they know, they've been there a long time. Richards especially. How long had Richards been there?
Oh, he was a graybeard, so he had been there, all his career.
Yeah, and the other guys almost 10 years, or if I remember correctly.
Sure. Yeah.
So they knew immediately you're not a sandblaster, but they did a really cool thing, and they took you in. They let you pull the hose, and then it was a while after that before you got your first like sandblasting gig, so to speak.
With those same guys, with same
guys.
Yeah. As it turned out, yeah, like I said, they could have bounced me right there, but you couldn't be there. The blasters in the Shipyards Union, it's like a little fraternity, so it's all those guys know each other. But it would have been possible that I had worked at Bremerton Naval Yard or Lake Union, was a small shipyard somewhere else. So maybe I knew. So yeah, when Richards came up and said, "So are you a sandblaster?" And these are the guys who knew the score. And so I had to be honest. I said, "No, I'm not." But I had to say something. I gotta keep my job. I keep getting laid off. And the thing about joining the union was, I think you had to have something like 10 consecutive days in order to officially join the union and become a union member. Prior to that, you just get laid off and keep going back and you never actually join the union, And so, yes, I lied. They were magnanimous, especially Richards. Yeah. And he said, "Yeah, well, just do exactly what I tell you, Nolan, then you won't have to lie anymore, And I'm like, "You're going to teach me how to be a sandblaster?" Uh-huh. And he said, something like that. He said, "Old sheep know the roads, little lammy's got to follow." Yeah. And then that opened the door for me. And then after that, I didn't have to lie about being a sandblaster, or at least knowing my way around and, how to make things work.
Right, because you had done it by then, so now you're in.
Yeah, and I did get my seniority. I joined the union. Then it was, then it was great.
Good from there.
Yeah,
and I bet they appreciated that moment of honesty, because I mean,
sure.
That's the story of everyone coming into the union hall, right? At least all the early guys. The story is, like you were just saying, you might get a 2-3 day repair job, and then you're gonna get laid off, and you're right back at the union hall.
Yeah.
So they probably appreciated that moment of blunt honesty where you're just like, I will do whatever. I need a job. I need seniority. I'm sorry I lied, but here I am.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if it's appreciated or just plain old felt sorry for me. I mean, they could tell I was sincere. But I remember some of the other guys were like, "Who is this white kid?" I mean, they didn't. What's he doing here? And Richards was like, "Well, he looked at the job. He knew we needed one more guy, and he's like, just do exactly what I tell you. Do exactly what I tell you, and you're going to be okay."
Yes.
And then the other guys fell in line, and as it turned out, we all became friends down the road.
Right. And so, and I mean that also is another big point, is you were kind of thrown into you were sort of in a culture shock moment when you got to the shipyard, right? Because you historically you had said, if I remember right, and you can fill in the gaps and correct me if I'm wrong, but so after World War II or during World War II, the United States Navy went up about 8 times roughly where it was, and that doesn't just mean they're done and they go out to sea. Like you were saying, they come in for repairs, and the Navy is still growing up to, we're late 70s, correct? So we're past the Vietnam era. But when they were creating that massive uptick in the fleet, they needed people to get out there and build these ships. Like a lot of people think the ships just happen, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of people to get out there and build these, especially those battleships and frigates and carriers and whatnot. And so you said historically the ship scalers union was primarily black people working there.
Yes, I
And
was
so
African American
then,
Union.
yeah.
It was some of the dirtiest work in the shipyard. By definition, ship scaler. Okay, so it's like scaling a fish. You're going to scrape or sand or blast, or clean the exterior of the
Clean
ship.
out the bilge too. You gave some pretty
Oh gosh.
gnarly descriptions of that.
Well, since it's laborers union, it was just any sort of cleaning, and oftentimes
You probably don't like to think about the bilge, do you?
Oh gosh,
Even to this day.
I know. I hear bilge, and I want to get further away from it. Yeah, but
yeah, it grossed me out a little bit reading about it. I'll let people read about what happens in the bilge.
That's one thing that I kind of had to wonder about, like that and the language in the book. Like when I finally got it written and I gave my sister a copy, she said, "Mike, I know that you don't talk like this." And I said, "No, I don't." But here's Mike Nolan, school counselor. I said, "But this is an accurate portrayal of what it's like to be in the shipyard." I thought about maybe changing it, but I'm just it's honest. At least
Yes.
what things were like in the late 70s, early 80s, working heavy construction. This is the way people talked. And I really had to get used to it. It was, again, Ryan, you said culture shock, and it was for me in a few different ways. And that was one of them. I had a tough talking boss, a lead man named Betty. And I'll have to change her name. But she was just from another planet as far as I could tell. And I was too green to know how to just roll with the punches and let it, roll off my back. And there was some education there. That was definitely my second education after college.
Well, and let's talk about Betty, because I wanted to ask you, because I wanted to hear it live. So your brother-in-law, Terry, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Terry gave you a bit of advice on how you should deal with Betty. And Betty was your lead man. She was, let's call her cantankerous to be nice. But she was on you daily. She was on everybody daily. And then finally, Terry, your brother-in-law, who he was, what do you call, what's the term for it? He carried bricks and
hod carrier. Yeah.
Hod carrier. Yeah.
The equivalent of laborers for, like building construction. Terry was a hod carrier. Great big guy, drove a huge Harley, big, lanky, long hair. Just the kind of guy that you didn't mess with. But it turns out he had a heart of gold. He was a wonderful guy.
Sure.
But he was imposing. And I had decided that I had about enough of the abuse that I was taking on the job. The one thing though, and this was, like I said, my first real job, and I was flabbergasted that you got holiday pay. I'd never encountered that up to that point. And I'm like, they pay you even when you don't show up to work. I couldn't believe it. And so
what a deal.
It was November. And I said, I'm going to work until the day after Thanksgiving, because then I can get an extra day's pay. I mean, it just made sense. And so I sort of set it up in my mind. And my folks were living in Sequim, so not too far from Seattle. I went home for Thanksgiving, and I was telling my family about, the job and how it was. And I hadn't also included that I was going to quit when I got back after Thanksgiving. But I was talking with Terry about it afterwards, after the dinner had died down. And I said, excuse me, I've got this one boss and she's riding me mercilessly and it's terrible. I don't know what to do. And he said, "Oh, I had a situation like that one time." And he said, and I'm like, "Did you punch the guy out?" And he said, No. I wanted to keep this job. So what I did, he told me, was whenever they started riding me, I just dropped what I had and I'd say, yeah. And then if they said anything else, I'd say even louder, yeah. And I'm kind of shaking my head like, okay, I could do this. He was coaching me. And so on the drive to the ferry, and then on the, back to my apartment, just in my mind, I kept playing, yeah. And then when I got back on the job, it was, another day or two, and then Betty was on me again about it, and really being coarse and offensive. And I remember we had split up the crew. One group was up on the ship still, and the other, I was down with some other guys on the pier, cleaning up trash, And she came down and gave me a ration. And I just dropped the bag, my trash bag, and I said, yeah, yeah, yeah. And Ryan, it stopped her in her tracks, and it's funny because I looked around and the other guys I was working with, you can kind of tell they were looking up to see what happened to Nolan or what's going on. And then Betty started in on me, I told you to, like that. And I said, yeah, yeah, yeah. I was just channeling Terry. It was like Saint Terry, my patron saint. And I looked over at one of the other guys and I could see his shoulders bumping up and down. So he was trying not to laugh. But he's like, no.
And that was Lamar, right?
Yeah, Lamar.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, he came over to slap me and said, yeah. I can't believe it. So finally I stood up for myself. And, this gets back to part of, I think there's sort of, in my mind, there's, hopefully there's two parts of the book that people like, if they take to it. One would be, they're going to learn, so I like books where I learn something. So they're going to learn about heavy construction and what it's like to be a sandblaster, because most of them probably haven't done that. But then the other part I hope they appreciate is no matter what sort of work they did, there's that first job, developing confidence, first, and you might start off with a lot of enthusiasm, but you find out in short order that there's a lot to learn, or you might find out, hey, I was trained, but that's not the way they do it here, or I have to do things differently, and there's a pecking order, and you're starting off at the bottom of the food chain, but you go through and you stick with it and you show up, and after a while you get some job confidence, and after a while of that you get some personal confidence, which is what I was looking for, and that's part of what came through with yeah. And I think people, like I said, even if they've done very different jobs, hopefully in the book they can relate to, I remember just gaining some confidence and growing and, understanding myself a little more through my work.
Totally. So anybody out there who's listening, if you got a boss that's riding you, that's all you do. Just use the Mike Nolan. Yeah.
It worked. I was floored. But it worked.
I can only imagine the stunned look on her face after you pulled that on her. Because what do? You didn't insult her. You didn't talk back to her. You didn't, you weren't rude.
But it had its effect, because it wasn't long after that the foreman showed up.
Yeah.
His name was Hildebrand, but we called him the warden. The warden showed up and he took me off to the side and he said, now, Nolan, now you be nice to Betty. But I had grown a confidence muscle, and I said, I'm going to be as nice to her as she is to me. And then Hildebrand, then he was sort of blustery, and he said, now you get along. And I said, I just repeated, I'll be as nice to her as she is to me.
That's it.
So again, there's part of growing up and coming into your own,
Totally. And that's a valuable lesson for anyone too, is, what you're going to deal with difficult situations in life, and in somewhere like the shipyard, I'm sure those situations, you almost feel defenseless just because that's the culture. People are there's guys yelling all the time, and everyone's expected to just work super hard, and so but I mean, you don't have to take it like that. You gotta do the work, you gotta work hard, but you don't need anyone insulting you, and it's okay. You can stand up for yourself in a way that's not punching someone in the face or like anything like that.
But that's having the confidence to stand up for yourself. It's developed because your starting point is just, I'm so glad I got a job. I can finally make some money, and it's like, I'll do anything to make this work. Well, no, you won't do anything. There are limits, and you're gonna stand up for yourself. But those are learned traits, learned qualities, and I talk about that in the book, and that's what I needed. That's what I needed at that point in my life.
There's definitely, there's a lot of confidence you can gain, and there's a honeymoon period, right? Whenever you start any new job, it's kind of, this is the best job ever, and my boss or my manager, they seem so wonderful, and then like you said, things start to settle, and okay, maybe it's not perfect, maybe my training wasn't perfect, but you find a way to navigate things and still work super hard and get everything done.
Yeah, and hopefully down the road you enjoy the journey. I think looking back, if I was going to say anything to that young Mike Nolan, like one thing would be, hey, it's going to work out okay. You're an okay person. It's going to work out okay. And if at all possible, try to enjoy some of the journey. Now maybe that's only come with age, but I
Yeah.
probably needed somebody to tell me that back then.
Well, then there you go. More advice for any young people listening. Delayed gratification is it's a learned skill, and it's not an easy one to master either.
Take some practice.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's see. I wanted to ask you about, so again, kind of going back to when you were first looking for the job.
Mm-hmm.
And so so did you grow up in Squim?
Yeah, I went to high school there. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you went to Gonzaga University,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a question. In the late 70s, was basketball just as big at Gonzaga as
You
it is
know,
today?
it's funny because sure, there were basketball players in my dorm. They were just these really tall guys. I mean, that was the only difference. Now, I'm sure they have their own training facilities. Basketball we hadn't started the mark few years yet. So
Right.
basketball hadn't taken off. I think baseball we were a little stronger in baseball, and that's
Okay.
maybe what we were known for back then. So they've certainly built an incredible dynasty since then. It's fun being a fan. Now people actually know how to pronounce Gonzaga. They've heard of it before. Before
Right.
nobody had heard of it. A little bitty school in Spokane. So
That's it. I know I've seen tons of people joke about, how they're not even sure Gonzaga exists until March Madness rolls around. And
yes,
then everyone's like, oh, yeah, that's cool.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, you graduated from there and you studied biology.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious. Obviously, guidance counseling became something where you eventually decided, like, hey, actually, I think I would enjoy this, and
Mhm.
maybe I could do it, and maybe I could get a job doing that. But I'm curious, when you were studying biology, where did you want to go? What was the dream at that
Oh,
point?
I had thought about medical school because that's the thing. A bachelor's in biology, that's not a terminal degree. I mean, you do that so you
Yeah.
can do dental school, or you want to get your PhD in biology, or you want to go on. And I applied for medical school. I think I got on a wait list at one school, but that's as close as I came. And then I I didn't have much guidance, and so nobody said, "Why don't you take the exam a second time?" Or here's a study course for it,
Oh,
or why don't you consider some other medical profession? Nobody said that, and instead, I thought, okay, this isn't it. I'm out of here. I'm not. That's it. So end of anything related to science, which
yeah.
is too.
Hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah, and of course, going into the shipyard, my 4-year degree was my best kept secret. I think if I had mentioned it to anybody, they would have said, "Well, and what are you doing here as a laborer?"
Right.
Which oftentimes I was asking myself. Um, but as it turned out, I thought I'll work a year, 2 years, and I can save enough money and then go to graduate school. And by now, I was looking at different programs, and this one on school counseling was sounding good. And I saved up my money, and just before school started, I got moved to swing shift. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to work. I'm just going to keep going as long as I can. I mean, another paycheck is great. That's more tuition money. And I need the rent. So I'll just keep working as long as I can. And then I'll fold my tent once, I'm just in over my head. But as it turned out, I mean, young guy, no kids, no family, just a young guy. I could work full time at night and go to school full time during the day. I was sleep deprived most of the time, but I could do it. And so I continued. I stayed on swing, and then, boy, some things just unfolded. I had a couple of years in by then, and I ended up becoming a lead man, and actually had blasters on my crew at one time, which was humbling because these guys still had far more experience than I did. But yeah, so I was able to do graduate school and work full time.
Yeah. So, you talked about the degree being your best kept secret, and I'm just curious about the time you grew up in. So a lot of people would have thought, and I think still to this day think, that any kind of, blue collar job, whatever that might be, so construction, heavy construction, shipbuilding, a lot of people see that as like, it's like you failed in the job market, and that's why you're there.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common idea. I think it's becoming less common. I think we're seeing some shifts in that, but
Hmm.
I'm just curious, when you were growing up, and again, this is the late 1970s, did you feel, was there kind of a pressure in society wherever you were at, where it was kind of like, if you, for lack of a better term, if you don't want to be a loser, you need to go to college, you need to get a degree, you need to get a good paying white collar job, and
Hmm.
anything else is almost a failure in life. And maybe I'm being a little, um,
Well,
maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on that.
I think some of my um, recollection was okay. As a child of the Eisenhower years, um, I think uh, you hold yourself up by the bootstraps, and when you got knocked down, you got back up and brushed yourself off and kept going.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think now, um, with some maturity and hindsight, I think if I got knocked down, I would say, why did I get knocked down? How can I avoid having that happen again?
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a time when I don't think people asked for help or didn't say, "Hey, this didn't work for me. What are some other options, or what else could I try to do, or what?" And then that was reflected in me just walking away from science and not pursuing any of that, but then not having any sort of other game plan. It was just you were supposed to tough it out, and if you had a problem, you worked it out on your own, and like I said, up by the bootstraps,
Mm-hmm.
which for problem solving and maybe for gaining direction doesn't suit you that well sometimes. So I
Yeah.
think that's part of what I remember. I think when we look at school now, I know just as a working as a school counselor, when I talked about college with students or with students' parents, I was always talking about a 4-year college or a 2-year college or lineman school or beauty college or culinary arts school. Or I mean, there's lots of college. There's lots of post high school training, and it's all
Mm-hmm.
college or something very similar. And they're what you want to find is your passion. That's what you
Mm-hmm.
want. Something that you can make a living at, but you'll actually enjoy the work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wide open, and there are all sorts of opportunities, but it doesn't have to be something that you've got figured out ahead of time and then you stick with it no matter what. And don't ask
Yeah.
for help or guidance. Yeah, I think that's maybe how I'd look at it looking back.
Okay. And so, would you encourage lots of people to get a trade job, even if it's for a period of time? So maybe not necessarily sign up for life, but would you encourage people to have a blue collar job, maybe early in their life or at some point in their life, to build some of those skills and learn about hard physical work?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I did that too. I would say definitely. Um, I know our high school had a terrific welding program that you could actually get certified in for different types of welding, helium arc, MIG welding, aluminum. And so you could come out of it with the paperwork to get a real good paying job. And I'd say, look, you don't have to do this for the rest of your life. Why don't you just make some money? Get
Yeah.
get settled, get on your own, get an apartment. Just
Mm-hmm.
live wherever you want to live, and get going in life. And that's a great start.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's available there, and I hope young people look at it without thinking, oh, it has to be. I won't make it unless I've got this 4-year degree or an advanced degree or something like that, because that's not how it turns out. That gets back to that part about it's
Yeah.
it's going to work out, and it did work out for me, and I got
Mm-hmm.
into something very different than I thought I was starting with, but keep the faith. This will work out. Just try to enjoy the journey if you can. You know.
That's it, right? Yeah. Enjoy the journey. You don't have to, like you said, yeah, you don't have to have it figured out. You don't have to make partner at the law firm tomorrow.
No, or you don't have to have
Like you said, you can
just,
you can do other things in the meantime, and you can build up to that. And
and you might be a more interesting person for it. And you don't have to have an
yeah.
answer to what are you going to do. It's okay for you to say, if you have a little bit of confidence, it's okay to say, I'm not sure. I'll know when I get there, or I'm still deciding that, or it's.
Uh-huh.
But again, I don't think that's the sort of thinking that I grew up with. But
Yeah.
I developed that, and as I said, it was a pivotal time, and that's why, because I accrued some of those skills. It's okay. you know.
Yeah. Do you think that your time working in the shipyard, do you think it made you appreciate like every blue collar like sphere? Did it kind of make you appreciate and think about like how did the roads get built and how do all these like skyscrapers appear and all, did it make you think about any of those things?
Oh, sure. For one thing, each craft had its own set of skills, and boilermaker, rigger, shipwright, welder, ship fitter, and this whole background of knowledge and craftsmanship, and you have to respect somebody that's good at what they do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I certainly came out of it with a respect that way, definitely. And I as I was learning how to be a sandblaster and figuring out, yeah, this is something I can get good at. Not as good as these other guys because they've been doing it, years and years. But you could get to a certain level where you felt good about your work, and you could tell yourself, hey, I'm good at this, and it's something that not everybody can do. It's actually a dangerous kind of work, and not everyone can do it, and but I'm good at it. And you would never say that, Ryan. I'd never say that out lound. But when you feel that,
I'm with you. Yeah.
Then you've got some confidence. Even just and I mentioned this in the book. I think there's a beauty to some of that manual labor when you can just step back at the end of the day and look at what you've accomplished. Again, you're not going to tell anybody. Nobody's going to give you any recognition. That's okay, because you can look at it and you said I did a great job. I did a great job today. I worked hard. I busted my hump, and look at this. I got all this done. And that feels great, even if it's never expressed.
No, I totally agree. Yeah. And I mean, as a, like I said, I'm a general contractor now, and it's not, I enjoy the work I do. Like I enjoy the tasks, and I'm very thankful for the knowledge I have. It's kind of like, I've got a lot of drywall jobs going right now, and it's like you said, it's not because I love drywall, but
you do appreciate somebody good at drywall. If you've ever tried it on your own, you really appreciate somebody who knows what they're doing.
And I've fixed some people who tried it on their own. I fixed their drywall, and they were very thankful when I came in. And like you said, when I don't love it, but when I can drywall the entire room and I get everything covered and it looks good and all my seams are nice and perfect and you can't tell where one sheet starts, the other, the next one begins, it feels great. And there is that internal confidence of like, I did that. Look at this room. This is awesome.
Yeah. That's taking the pride in your work and in your capabilities. And there are abilities that maybe not everybody else has. So
totally,
take pride in that. And again, you'd never say that, but inside you can think it, and it feels great. It feels great.
It's okay to think it and look at the work you've done and say like, check this out.
Yeah,
like for yourself, this is great. I like this.
Yeah.
That's a good feeling, and I think that when people can practice that, especially, I mean, and like you said, this is applicable to your entire life. It's not just, you don't have to be building ships to appreciate a hard day's work and appreciate what you've accomplished in front of you. But in your regular life, whatever you're doing, you can look at, you can frame your mind to look at the work you're doing and say like, look what I've accomplished today. Look where I used to be. Think about yourself day one, the first time you walked into whatever environment you're in, and now look where you're at. Like the first time you walked into was it Todd or Lockheed that you walked into first when you were looking for the job?
Todd. Yeah,
it was Todd. When you walked into the office and the guy said, "What trade are you?" and I think you said you basically just had a blank expression to offer him, and you were like, "I don't what." Or did he ask craft? Did he ask craft?
He said, "What's your craft?"
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was thinking, craft? Does he mean like arts and crafts?
That's right, yeah.
Fortunately, I'd had enough failed job interviews to realize, don't say anything. I had the good sense. But he could tell I had this blank look on my face. So he cleared his throat and he leaned back and he said, well, craft means, a shipyard craft, like a boilermaker or a fitter or a joiner. Are you any of those? And I said, no, no, I'm not. And he said, well, okay, then you want to hire on as a laborer.
uh,
And I'm like, great, great. Where do I sign up?
yeah. So, and then I want to ask you about your, I guess, give me a rundown a little bit of your experience with the union, because, and you know, we don't have to get political or anything,
Yeah.
because unions are, you know, an oft talked about subject to this day. And
Mm-hmm.
I would just love to hear about, because I go back and forth. I think unions, you know, they do a lot of great things. And
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, there's some issues with them. There's nuance with everything, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I have one con example that you'll probably know where I'm going in a second. But when you get certain guys who are have very high seniority in the union, like Red, who you talked about in the book.
Uh-huh.
Which, by the way, I was actually laughing out loud when I
Oh,
read
good.
those parts about him, because if you've ever been in a construction environment, you've ever been in any kind of a trade, you've seen Reds
Yeah.
around. And
Yeah.
so,
There's one in every
but
crowd, right? I mean,
yeah, but there's one in every crowd. But tell me a little bit, or tell the people a little bit about Red, and
yeah.
why he's such a fascinating character. He's a small
Yeah.
character in your book, but he's a fascinating one.
We were starting with unions, and gosh, I love the union because it got me my job, and
Yeah.
they're necessary for collective bargaining. You know, not every individual is trying to figure out their salary, or also there's some protection in the union, and that you can't be just fired out of hand because the foreman decides he doesn't like you that day. So
Mm-hmm.
no, I loved, and it was your one source of security was the union. So
Okay.
I'm definitely big on unions, but like any system that works pretty well, you can find somebody that'll try to game it a little bit, you know, and
Oh,
it's
sure.
just their nature that they're going to do that. And this fellow we were talking about, Red, he would always say, "I've only got one speed. I've only got one gear. This is as fast as I can go." Everybody else would be embarrassed. Nobody wants to be that guy. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to be that guy. But somehow he took some pride in that. And yeah, he was just this really slow moving wheel.
And his gear it must have been Park, because it didn't sound like he even got to first gear. So or maybe neutral on a gentle slope. That sounds like
Yeah.
what Red's uh, gear was.
Other people took pride in being the person that, you know, is just working hard and they're there every day and they just, you know, give it their all. And at the end of the day, you're drenched in sweat, but you know that you put in, you know, your 8 hours. But I remember with Red, he was the instance in the book, he was working as a fire watch, which is a person who, it's a safety job where you park yourself next to a welder and you make sure the welder doesn't set anything on fire or set himself on fire. You're parked there with a fire extinguisher. And it's a job that I hated. If I could ever get out of being a fire watch, I'd do it because it was so boring. There were times, you know, I had several 8 hour shifts when I never turned on my fire extinguisher, or maybe I did at lunchtime to cool off my Dr. Pepper, you know, because that's something you can do with a fire extinguisher that actually works. And
You shouldn't have given anyone that idea. That's going to be all
yeah,
over TikTok in
now
like
they're
a
going to use
couple
that fire
weeks.
extinguisher for something. But I remember he liked being a fire watch, and I remember he was parked on a 5 gallon bucket that was turned upside down, sitting next to the welder, and he had his fire extinguisher next to him, and a lead man walked by, and he didn't move. Now we all wore safety glasses, but you could get dark safety glasses too, which is actually a good idea for a fire watch, so you don't have the flash from the welding.
Yeah.
So he had on these dark glasses, and the lead man walked by and noticed that, you know, Red didn't move. And so then he went and got a supervisor, and, you know, they waved their hand in front of his face, and then they woke him up and said, "Hey, you're fired." You know, they could fire you if you were, you know, drinking on the job, sleep on the job, or fighting on the job. Any of those three, automatic termination. And they took him to his locker, had him clean it out, escorted him out the gate. That was it. Except when they woke him up, he stood up and he crossed himself like you do in church and said, "Amen." And I mean, there was a witness there to see all that happen. And 2 days later, the union went to bat for him. And 2 days later, Red was back on the job with 2 extra days of pay. to make up for his time he's lost. And so some people can game the system. It's like I said, with any system that is useful and works well, somebody could always turn it to their advantage, which is a shame, because then all of a sudden it's not the best system it could be.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you were saying, it helped you and thousands, tens of thousands. I don't know how long the union was in operation for and how many people probably walked through the door. So if there's one in every 10,000
that's right,
can game the union, it's probably still a good thing, right?
That's right.
I could not believe that he must have rehearsed it in his. I don't know. He must have expected one day someone's going to catch him sleeping.
Oh yeah, he had to.
He thought, I know exactly what I'll do. As soon as they wake me up, I'll cross. And
and say amen. That's all you need to do. Yeah.
But I agree with you. When you are in those busy work environments, there is an infectiousness to just everyone around you is just working super hard. There's, like you said, what did you call it? Perfect chaos. Is that what you called it in the book? Perfect chaos. Yeah. And that's what it feels like. It's chaotic and it's busy and it's loud and but everyone's there and they're working hard. It makes you want to work hard, and it
doesn't. That, I think, part of the persona. If you see a guy in coveralls and wearing a hard hat, you're going to assume, oh, this guy could help me change my flat, or he would know what to do. And so you kind of live up. I mean, I know it's a stereotype, but you kind of live up to that. And it's
totally.
I think it was a nice stereotype. It certainly helped me gaining some confidence in life.
Yeah, there's something about throwing on the hard hat and the high vis vest. There's something that sparks in you for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so, towards the end, like you were saying earlier, you became a leadman, and so help me out again. So, the foreman is a white hat, right? So there were the white hats.
Because you've got your whatever the craft is. So in this case, ship scalers, and there might be a group of 6, 7, 8 people, and then over them is a lead man, and maybe you've got 4 or 5 leadmen on a ship, and over them is the foreman. Now all those people are union members. The next layer is people who work for the company, and they're white hats, and they wore white coveralls. They actually had a white hat. We just called them white hats, but they were Lockheed management, and they had their own hierarchy, of course. But there was a divide.
Show up.
Sorry?
Yeah. I said that's when the suits would show up, right? That's the
Yes, yeah. That's right.
So you became a leadman, and what I thought, and I guess it might be conjecture, maybe in your time there, maybe you got a better idea of it, but you seem to have wanted to do things a little differently. You wanted to be, you weren't a pushover, but you seem to be a little more compassionate and a little more kind of understanding of others and take an interest in them. And, some of the other leadmen like Betty, who we talked about earlier, seemed to kind of relish in the fact that she was in charge. And I think you mentioned too, we can get back to Betty in a minute on that, but, you seem to have wanted to take this, I'm going to be, you're not going to be Mr. Cool and Mr. Fun, or a pushover, but you seem to have wanted to adopt a slightly different attitude than others. And I'm just curious, do you think that other people who became lead men like Betty, do you think maybe they tried, or maybe they wanted to do things a little differently and either couldn't because they didn't have the right people under them, or it was just the culture? I'm just kind of curious, what made you want to do things differently, and do you feel anyone else was able to do the same, or did they try?
Oh, no, there were other people who were good leads, but there were also people, I mean, you see this in all different walks of life. Somebody gets their little bit of power and then they're going to use that to the fullest extent, and you think, my gosh, give me a break. I think for me, I was going into it thinking, wow, I'm what, 24, 25, and I'm getting supervisory experience. I mean, this is incredible to think about. And probably most of these people are going to be older than me. I'm sure they're going to have more experience than me. So I really approached it with just a light touch and thought, I thought, what do I like in a lead? What do I like in a lead man? Just when they respect your job, respect your skills, give you what you need to do the job, and then get out of the way. And that's how I tried to run things. And it at first, Ryan, I started this off and I was just waiting for somebody to say, "Who do you think you are?" Because there's this young guy, with an L on his hat, and you're the lead man. How old are you? That's what I was
Right.
expecting. But I didn't hear any of that. And when I did assign work and get the crew going on things, people just it says how do I want to be respected, or how do I want to be treated? Well, I want to be treated with some dignity, and I want to be treated with some respect. And as long as I did that for other people, they responded. By and large, they responded to that in a
Yeah.
dignified way, in a respectful way, and it was great. Then you didn't have to be a hard nose. You just you get the work done, everybody's happy, and you go home at the end of the day and relax. That's so. I was lucky, I think, at that young age to get supervisory experience like that. That's
Yeah.
a real growth.
No, it's awesome. Well, and like you said, I'll be as nice to you as you are to me. That
As
is
part
it.
of, yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, and respect, it's earned, it's not given. It's not
mhm,
something that just because you got a sticker that says L on your forehead doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be given all the respect in the world.
that's right.
Um, and you did have one guy who got a little heated with you.
Yeah,
Um,
that
talk
was
about that.
yeah. There were some circumstances which led to us having a confrontation, and he basically, walked. He was going to get laid off, so he walked off the job, but he told another guy on the crew that he was going to beat me up when I got out of the yard. You were in this fenced-in shipyard with a
Hmm.
security gate and a security guard. But once you left that, then you're out in the real world in the parking lot. And yeah, I
And
just
this guy was not a small guy,
no,
right?
he had like 20 pounds on me, 3 or 4 inches. He's a big guy, and
Yeah.
I didn't relish the idea of getting beat up out there in the yard. I really didn't want that to happen in front of the people, my crew,
Yeah.
anybody else to see that. So I just remember, gosh, you're walking toward the gate, and I was just moving mechanically. I don't know how I could move my legs because I was,
Hmm.
my whole body was tensing up. And this fear that I don't think I had since seventh grade when I was in a fist fight in junior high school, this fear comes back and you think, I'm going to get whipped. And this is going to be embarrassing. There's no way out of it, you know. And I walked out into the yard, and I mean, there's one of the guys on the crew said, "Hey, I'll walk to your car with you, Nolan, because I know, And I'm like, "No, it's okay, it's all right." Although I was praying they would anyway, and I walked out there on my own, and this was this swing shift, so it's dark, and gosh, every little shadow in the parking lot I thought was a person, was this guy waiting to pound me. And but I mechanically walked to my car. I got there. I took out the keys and I tried to put the key in the door, and it didn't. Something was different. It didn't. And I took a step back, and then I realized the car was lower than it should be. And then I looked, and all four tires were slashed. So I didn't get beat up, but it took me a long time to get home that night.
I bet it did. Was there a part of you that was like, "Oh, thank goodness he slashed my tires and didn't beat me up"?
Oh yeah, are you kidding? I mean, it's visceral. And it's so funny because you haven't felt that since you were a kid.
Yeah.
You haven't felt that since you're just a youngster, but it comes back to you, and you can feel it in the pit of your stomach, and you're like, this is going to be terrible. And like so many things, so many fears when you're a kid, the fear of it is worse than what might actually happen. I mean, maybe you got punched in the face, but the fear of it all is 10 times worse, right? And I think that was the case
Yes.
for me. It was just the fear of it. Gosh.
And so, and yeah, it also just highlights your. It's kind of weird. Like the shipyard is, at least during your time there, it's this weird mishmash of people from all different walks of life. So you got guys who want to pick fights in the parking lot, and you got guys who have been to prison recently, and you got and then you got people who just the shipyard was their option and they took it.
Yeah.
And it's it's this weird mishmash of all these different people from all these different walks of life. A lot of great people, it sounds like. A lot of good people.
Definitely.
Maybe rough around the edges sometimes, but sounds like a lot of decent, hardworking people there.
Yes.
And then you got some rough people too, but it puts you on it puts you on like an even ground. Like everyone is sort of level there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it didn't matter that you had a degree in biology at the shipyard. It didn't matter who was in prison recently. Everyone was sort of on an even playing field, with the exception, of course, of the hierarchy of people in charge. But I found that very fascinating.
Yeah, it was an even playing field, and it was made even by the work. So if you came and you showed up every day and you worked hard for 8 hours, people respected that. People respected that. And it didn't matter what your background was or your race or anything else about you. If you put in the work, there was respect for that. So it very much evened things out. And even a young guy like me, I just, knew nose to the grindstone, get it done. And of course I was learning, but, work as hard as you can. And there's, even when somebody sees, oh, he doesn't know this about the job or he's new to it, they could still tell that he's busting his hump. He's working hard. Yeah. And that little respect comes along with that, which is a good thing.
And so, so you said you grew up in Sequim, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in Sequim, it's a small place, if I remember.
Oh, yeah. There were 100 kids in my graduating class.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
No students of color. We had some Native American kids. That was our minority there for the school. But, just I guess a sheltered environment, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally feel that. Where I grew up in my high school, my graduating class was, I think it was 36.
Oh my gosh.
I come from a small town as well.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. We were one of the smaller ones, but still 36 is not a lot. A lot of people are shocked when I tell them that. So, and then Gonzaga, during the time you were there, was it a diverse school or was it majority white?
I remember, 2 or 3 black kids that I got to know, but there's not very many. I mean, there wasn't diversity, and it's interesting because you're this young guy and you're looking out at the world and you want to be fair-minded and sensitive, and you are sensitive, being, you try to treat everybody the same. But there's a different sensitivity once you're, in the situation I was in, where you start to think about what did this guy or what did these guys go through just to get here, and they didn't maybe have the same things that I had starting off, or what was their life like? And I don't talk so much about race relations in the book, but I think I do reflect on just sensitivity, because that was a growing area for me. I think I mentioned George and Steve, 2 Mexican Americans who were the hardest working guys I'd ever met.
Yeah.
And I got to know them. We worked together. I got to know them, and just we're sitting having lunch in the locker room one night. This was on swing shift, and I said innocently, so if your names are George and Steve, I don't get it. You come from Mexico. Why are you George and Steve? I'd never say that today, but it was said in all innocence. And I remember Stevie said, well, our names are Jorge and Esteban, but we say George and Steve to make it easier for people like you. And he said this without any trace of malice. It was, and I said, oh, okay. But it was just part of trying to grow a little sensitivity. And there's nothing like sensitivity to be in a situation where it's different for you and you have to look at things differently. Like you said, I was the only white guy on the sandblasting crew, and the lead man was black and the foreman was black. So that helps you develop a little bit of sensitivity and maybe to think a little deeper about things. And that's an area that I grew in, I think, during that time.
And it sounds like, at the end of the day, all these guys, you're working together on a job and you're getting it done. And so, it's and it's cool. And like I said, I totally, I feel the same way. Like I said, I grew up in a small town too. And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, when I went to college, it was like, yeah, culture shock for me, because I'm there's all sorts of different people from all different walks of life, all kinds of different places, different
Mm-hmm.
experiences, and it's a little weird. And like you said, you try to, I didn't have any bad notions about anyone. Um,
Yes.
just because you grow up in a mostly white small town doesn't, make you a racist necessarily or anything like that.
It does make you insensitive. No, you're trying to be sensitive, of course.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
there's some things that you're probably going to figure out in ways that they don't have to be uncomfortable, but
Mm-hmm.
as you're kind of like speaking to people, you're going to get new perspectives. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of funny. Well, maybe it makes you uncomfortable because you're like, oh, I've never thought of that before. But to someone telling you, generally they're just telling you how it is. Like,
Yeah.
uh, George and Steve, Jorge and Esteban, like
Yeah.
they weren't trying to be mean to you. They were just saying, oh, here's why we go by George and Steve. And
This is why we do this, and it works
yeah.
for us.
And actually I worked with a guy, his name was Jesus, and everyone called him Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know why, because Jesus is not that difficult. But
Yes.
I found out his name was Jesus and not Jesse one day, and I was like, then I called him Jesus from then on, because
Sure.
I just didn't know everyone called him Jesse, so I just assumed that was his name. But
Yeah.
kind of one of those similar things where it's like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. I wouldn't.
Be a little deeper in your sensitivity, and then it's
Exactly.
appreciated.
Yes.
It's appreciated when you do that.
And then same with Betty. We talked about her, and she was a tough one. And you kind of you said you met with her son, and did you feel like you had a moment where you realized, okay, like maybe Betty's a lot, maybe she's pretty hard on everybody, but at the same time she is, I don't even know what the percentage was, but she's one of the very few women who are not only in the shipyard, but she's also a leadman. And
Right.
so do you feel like maybe she overcompensated early on, and just maybe she stuck with it because she felt like she had to get respect?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know if it was overcompensating really, because I remember. Well, first I'll back up a little bit. Yeah, I sat down at lunch one time on swing, and another guy sat down across from me, and he mentioned Betty. He said, "Yeah, that's my mom," and my jaw fell open, because I was expecting like a three-headed monster or something, and he said, "Oh, did you work on her crew?"
Yeah.
I said, uh-huh. And he said, when we got talking, he said, "No, she was a good mom. She's a single mom and raised me." And he said, "Look around. I mean, look at this is the shipyard, and it's in a rough place to work with rough people who talk rough. And how do you think she fit in? She's one of the first women to work here." And again,
Yeah.
it just increases your sensitivity. I remember looking back after a while, thinking, Betty and I might have done okay. I mean, we would have understood each other. We might have, gotten along. Um,
Right.
if I wasn't so green. So it's starting off and put off by it all. But no, she had to fit in, and she did that, and
Yeah.
actually became a lead, and she did fine there. It was just that's what she had to do to make it work. So
No,
I
it totally makes sense.
I appreciated it. Again, it's that deepening of sensitivity. Uh,
Yeah. I like that. I like that phrasing, a deepening of sensitivity.
mhm.
That's really good. I'm curious, do you have any contact with anyone from those days, or
No,
no one?
no. Uh-uh.
Do you wonder if maybe they'll hear about this book?
Yeah, yeah. Just I usually, for some of it, left out last names, but somebody I'm sure will see it and go, "Hey, that's me." So I hope, I hope they reach out and we can connect again. That would be fun. It'd be a
It
blast. I'd love
I bet
that.
it'd be cool to hear from your sandblasting guys.
Oh man, that would be fantastic. No, those are just men I had so much respect for, and they were so so magnanimous in helping me out. Yeah, they didn't need to by any means, but they really took me under their wing. And I mentioned in the book, Eddie, once he saw I was going to make it, he's like, "Yeah, come on, Brother Knowles." So Mike Nolan became Brother Knowles on this sandblasting crew. They were so supportive and welcoming for me,
Yeah.
which is what I needed desperately in that work situation. Yeah.
Yeah, you went from Mike Nolan to just Nolan to Brother Knowles, and then
Yes.
eventually to Mr. Nolan as a guidance counselor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the full circle to it there. And you mentioned the wages for construction. Yeah, I took a serious pay cut signing up for the first school district, but
Yeah.
but I knew that that's how you start off, and if you stick with it, then your pay goes up over the years, and
Yep.
it all works out.
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's, it's a timing thing because for me getting into teaching, I was pretty green when I left. I was just finishing my second year because I was a late graduate. I didn't get
Oh.
my bachelor's until after I was married. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I was late in the game, but if you stick with it, if the district I was at, if you put in your 15 years and you get your education, you top
Mhm.
out around 100,000 a year. So
You
it's
can.
it's not bad if you put the time in and you get into it early.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's no speed running that process. You got to put the time in,
Yeah.
and so it was a timing thing. But maybe those doors will be open to me one day again, and I can always go back to teaching.
I, I I was fine taking the pay cut, and then once I got going in this career, it was work that I loved. I absolutely loved being a school counselor.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your counseling days too, because I'd like to hear about that time of your life as well. What
Oh,
what is the yeah? Tell everyone about kind of what first drew you to that career path, and then how'd you find your footing and go from there?
well, I had worked as a camp counselor for the YMCA up at Camp Orkila in the San Juan Islands, and I liked that work, but I hadn't thought of that career-wise
Hmm.
until I was much further down the road, and then looking at graduate school programs, and then I found out, oh, you can get it's a 2-year certificate, and this is the process, and this is how you get a job, and it like I talked about with the first job, you're starting off and you have the training from classes, but there's still a lot to learn. The difference for me, Ryan, was, before I was, Mike Nolan, college graduate, and then Mike Nolan, unemployed.
Yeah,
And
that's I can't forget
finally,
that part, right?
finally, Mike Nolan, ship scaler. But once I got some confidence in what I was doing, who I was, then I was just Mike Nolan. And I thought,
Yeah,
it doesn't matter so much what the job, I'll figure out the job. I had enough confidence to know that I could do that. I'll figure out the job. I'll work hard. People respect that. And then it was just okay to be Mike Nolan and
yeah,
Mr. Nolan in the case of public school. So yeah, loved the work. Absolutely loved it. I was worried as I was approaching retirement. I mean, I was at Port Angeles High School, so Port Angeles is a small town too, and
okay,
everybody knows you. You go to the grocery store, and kids are working there. You see parents, so everybody knows you. And there's an identity that goes with that, which is, I found it, wonderful. Um,
hmm,
and I was worried. I thought, I'm just going to be this old retired guy. I'm not going to be Mr. Nolan anymore. What am I going to do? And I, I cast it about like a lot of people do before they retire, and thought about how I wanted to spend the time. I mean, you got to fill 40 hours a week.
yeah,
And you know, my wife and I talked about traveling, and of course, we wanted to spend more time with the grandkids. But 40 hours a week is a chunk of time, and I thought I need some sort of hobby, something that'll push me, that'll be challenging. It'd be nice if it's something creative or artistic. Um,
hmm.
and I thought, music. I love music, but I'm just a music.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't play an instrument. I can't read music, so I wasn't going to write a symphony. I thought maybe painting or drawing. At one time, I'd done some work like that, and I thought, okay, that's a possibility. Maybe I could get into some artwork. I thought poetry. No, I can't do that, and I have great respect for people that can, but I know enough that I can't do it. And I thought, writing, yeah, I could write. Maybe I'd write a book. And so for my retirement hobby, I settled on writing. And it turns out, yeah, writing is the easiest creative art to do badly. And I found out that I had a steep learning curve. Writing, the writing part is easy. If you want to be good writing or good storytelling is a craft, and I think I started off just by reminiscences about this work in the shipyard, but that's not a book. I mean, you need a narrative arc, you need character development, you need setting, you need some conflict and resolution, and it really challenged me. Fortunately, I enjoy rewriting and editing and revising, and I really
Good.
work, yeah, because there's a ton of that and all this stuff that you labored over, like a whole chapter, it's gone, you know. So, that it turned out to be a wonderful retirement hobby, and replaced that work I had done as a school counselor. And definitely filled the time. It's funny because I'll talk about it as my retirement hobby, and my wife says, "Hobby?" She said, "Mike, you write more than 40 hours a week, and when you're not writing, you're talking about writing. And when you're not talking about writing, and I say, Mike, what do you think about? You're thinking about writing. So don't you don't need to call it a hobby." I said, "How about passion?" I'll just say it's my passion, my retirement passion. She said that works a little better. I think she's right.
Well, and I think you need that. I think you need something. You can't. I don't think you're supposed to just retire and be done. And
right.
I think that's how people begin, fading away. I think you need, and it doesn't necessarily have to be writing a book like you, but
No.
It's got to be something. You got to have something that gives you some spark, something that
yes,
gives you a little bit of fire, something you enjoy. And I think
definitely
when you retire and you plan well, then you get to do fun things like, go golfing or write a book or something.
Yeah. Just you need to find that passion. And I think I've met guys who had retired from the high school, and then a few years later they're back subbing, and you're like, what's the deal? And they'd say, well, you can only sit on the beach reading a book for so long. And I thought, yeah, it's true. You need more than you need a passion.
Yeah.
At least that's what I needed, and that worked for me.
So a few more things I want to talk about.
Sure.
First, so obviously, shipbuilding, it's dangerous, and you knew several people who died while you were in the shipyard, and sadly one of them was a very good friend of yours.
Yes.
At the time, your best friend at the time.
Yes.
And I feel pain even talking about it, because it was such a sad moment in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And you were both on you were both on this trajectory. Like you were saying, you were both feeling like you were heading in the right directions together, and I mean they were totally different directions, but
yeah,
as you had to kind of re-explore that time in your life and some of those feelings, was that difficult to get back to think about Chris and where he might be right now if
oh sure, it was just such a tragedy, especially because you said we were on the same trajectory. We had just graduated, we were figuring out our lives, trying to make some money, get set up in the city, figure out what the next step's going to be. The difference was Chris was just Mr. Personality, and he was very
like a fun guy.
He was so much fun. He was really humble too. He was humble pie. But when you got talking to him, you thought, dang, this is amazing. Yeah. I mean, everybody wanted to be Chris Wells. I mean, he was just this incredible guy. That's why it was just such a tragedy when he died there. And, the construction work, I've read that's the highest incident for work-related deaths. I mean, mining and logging and maybe farming are up there for accidents. But construction work, I think, is the leader for work-related deaths. And because of that, I think people were always just a little cavalier. I was, 23, 24, so you're invincible, and you think nothing like that's ever going to happen to you. And when you heard about somebody dying, then you said to yourself, well, they should have done this, or they should have looked out for that, or they should have known better. There's always this 20/20 hindsight, but work isn't like that. I mean, and work is, pushing and going quickly and getting the job done. And sometimes there could be an accident. And
Yeah.
yeah, in that case of, a couple of guys I'd worked with that died, or other people I just heard about in the yard that died. It's just tragic.
It is.
Tragic. Yeah. And I almost, it's that I almost died when I was hurrying on a job and actually trying to impress the foreman with what a great sandblaster I was.
Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the exciting opening of the book is you
Gosh.
try trying to show how good you were.
Yeah, well, and I was just hungry to blast anything I could get my hands on and to run with these guys who were the old pros. And I didn't have a fear of heights. I don't know why, but for
Yeah.
some reason I didn't mind heights or tight spaces, or I didn't mind things like that.
It's because you were in your early 20s.
Yeah, that's why. Now I'm a lot more sensible. And but when the foreman said, "Yeah, I want you to blast that crow's nest," and I said, "Oh, no problem," you know. And then I had the full gear on. I'm climbing up the ladder on the mast, and you get up underneath the crow's nest. You have to flop open this grill work opening, a little door, and I crawled through and got up on the platform and got started, but I didn't flop it back down like you're supposed to. And so I started blasting, and I've got the hose and I'm working along the railing to start with, and then I'll work down on the stanchions. And I took a step, and it was right. It was the strangest feeling. I took a step, and there was absolutely no resistance.
It's a weird feeling.
I'd never had that feeling before. You got these big work boots, steel-toed work boots on. You put your foot down, nothing. It was the strangest thing. And then I just fell right through the opening. And I'm still holding the sandblasting hose. It's still going. And thank the Lord that I had clipped my safety harness on the railing. I didn't even remember doing that. I just thought, as I was passing through that deck, I thought, I'm going to die right now.
Yeah.
And it's weird because you can actually have it's only, what would it be, like 1 or 2 seconds, but it's enough time for you to think things like that, and you can kind of see the deck going by as you're falling down through it, and you're thinking, I'm going to die right now. It's about 100 feet up in the air, and of course, boing, I get this incredible jolt on my side and realize that I had my safety harness attached to the railing, thank goodness, and the hose had flown out of my hands by then, and all the work down below, 100 feet down below, everybody stopped and they're looking up like, what the heck's going on, And the Richards down at the sand pot cut the pressure on the pot, and the hose went dead. And I looked around and figured out, I'm not dead. Okay. And then where's the ladder? And I got my hands on it, and I got my feet on it, and then then you give them the signal. It's like, okay, fire me up again, and you start working again, and just go right back to work. Like, but later on that day, like on the bus ride home, you're thinking, I came this close to death. I came this close to killing myself.
Right.
Industrial accident, and they happen.
Yeah.
They happen.
It's funny because when I was in my early 20s and I worked for my dad for many years, and I was the same. I had no fear of heights. Heights did not bother me. And I literally, I remember we were framing this massive pole barn, and we just had the walls up. We were getting ready to put the roof on it. And I was standing on top of the wall, just the wall. There's nothing to grab onto. And probably like 20 feet off the ground. But I was just walking across the wall. I didn't even think about it. And then fast forward to a few years ago, and I'm 32 now. And so a few years ago, I was 29, and I was just working for my dad for a summer, and between years of teaching, and same kind of situation. We were getting ready to frame a roof, and it was like I could not will my body to stand up on the wall. Like, I don't know if that's just maturity catches up with you, and something in your brain
common sense.
Yeah, your common sense finally kicks in as you get close to 30. But
yeah,
I couldn't do it. I was like, I've never experienced it before. I was paralyzed. Like I'm in my brain saying, get on the wall, and couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I guess something happens as you get older.
I think so.
From the ages of 21 to 30.
Yeah, I would definitely have a hard time doing any of that work now. And part of it would Just, I think, no, this isn't safe. I shouldn't do it. Or when I go hiking or I'm climbing, it's something that I would have done before. I'm thinking, no, no, don't do that. Let's go the longer way because that's safer. You know.
Right. And then so you kind of you round out the story with not only you becoming a guidance counselor, but you also meet your current wife to this
Yeah.
day still, right? Yeah. And
42 years.
42. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So yeah, what a cool, everything sort of just kind of came full circle for you. And in this like next step into your life, you got married and you got the job you wanted and
Hmm.
moved on. So 42 years, and then you said grandkids, so you got kids too.
Yes. And five grandkids. We have 3 children and 5 grandchildren.
Wow.
And yeah, it just I met Ann in graduate school. We were both working. She was teaching and had returned to graduate school, and I was working as a sandblaster. And the interesting thing was, I think we were both involved with other people. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm on the make or I'm on the prowl or I'm trying to meet somebody. It was just very much a friendship. Started as this lovely friendship.
Yeah.
And then somehow, over the next few weeks, all those other people just sort of disappeared because found I was spending, every day with Ann and just couldn't wait to see her the next day. And yeah, and then you realize, hey, this is the person I want to spend my life with. And I guess that relates back to one of the very first things I said was, it's okay. It's going to work out okay. It'll work out all right.
Right.
Just try to enjoy the journey because it's going to work out okay. You know.
So
And yeah,
42 years, what advice do you have for
oh God,
any young man looking to get married or any man, like
sure.
me who's 8 years in and still
I would
figuring things out?
I would say, what are the ingredients that help you get to 42 years? I'd say patience, understanding, acceptance. I think there's romance there, and there's affection, but those are the easy parts. Those are the fun parts. They're the nice parts, and
Right.
and those are wonderful. But to get you through all the ups and downs, and there'll be challenges, just like of course there are in life. There are challenges and rough spots, and work things out, things you're not sure of. How are you going to solve this? And that's where you need the understanding, forgiveness, patience.
Hmm.
Those come into play, and then that sustains you for the long haul. And then the romance is just the frosting on the cake. That's just what makes it so great.
No, that's good. I like that. Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, I've been married. I'm coming up on 8 years.
Okay.
And hopefully I'm doing my math right. Otherwise, I'll have a problem.
Yeah, you'll hear about it.
um, but yeah, coming up on 8 years, and marriage is beautiful, and
Mhm.
it's not for the faint of heart, but it's a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
like you said, I think patience, understanding, kindness, and yeah, you're right. Romance is the easy part. That comes pretty naturally for most.
Sure.
But yeah, it's good. And like I said, I'm still learning, and I'm sure
So am I.
I don't know if you're done learning.
No, I'm still learning. I think we all are. That's part of the process that you do. I mean, I said one of the themes of the book is reinvention, and I thought about that. That's a word that gets kicked around a lot, And I thought reinvention. What does it mean? I mean, you think about the parts you want to keep the same, what's working, and then you think about the parts. Hey, I need to modify this or change it, and it's true of yourself too. And even at 70, I think I still look at myself like that. Like, what do I want to do better at? What can I change? What do I need to change? And how can I be a better person? So, that idea of reinvention, it's still a worthwhile pursuit.
Yeah. So the shipyards closed. Well, Todd closed down, correct?
Todd,
And then Lockheed closed down temporarily, and then was bought by a private.
no, it's the other way around. Lockheed,
Oh, excuse
we,
me.
we went on strike. Boy, it was just happening when I was leaving the yard. We went on strike. It was actually a lockout. We were miles apart from management on the negotiations. It was a
Mhm.
lockout, and then they ended up just closing down the shipyard, not building ships. At least I think I think Lockheed still has some yards like in the Great Lakes area maybe, but they closed down there were 2 yards there in Seattle. And then Todd, yeah, they struggled too. They went bankrupt, but they emerged from bankruptcy and then were bought by Vigor Shipyard. And now, if you take the ferry from Bainbridge Island across Elliott Bay into Seattle, when you look over there to see those cranes and container ship cranes in the shipyard, that's Vigor Shipyard. And I think it looks like they're doing well. I always look whenever I did go on that ferry ride. I'm the guy that's kind of leaning on the railing, seeing up on dry dock, and I'm like, oh, they've got 2 Washington State ferries in there for maintenance, and and they're working on. So it looks like they're doing well. It looks like encouraging.
Because I know that we talked about blue collar work, and of course there's huge shortages in all industries of it, and including shipbuilding. So I'm glad to hear the shipbuilding is still happening. But hey, if anyone's looking for a job, maybe head on down there and see if they need some people, because I know that even right now, I think last I heard, I think some of our military shipbuilding right now is years behind of where it should be.
I've read that.
So there's a lot of shortages, and that's why I said at the beginning, I think a lot of people should read this book. I think a lot of young people should read it and maybe think a little bigger about what can I do now? Do I go get a construction job for a couple years while I figure things out, or a ship building job of some kind? And so,
sure.
I wanted to see where it's at now. But it's sad too, because I think of all those guys you worked with who, working at the shipyard was what they did. And you mentioned that in the book, where for you, it was a stepping stone, albeit a very important one in your life. But for most everyone else there, the shipyard was their life. And so it's it was kind of a sad moment to think about, where did they all go? What did they all do?
When Lockheed just shut down and said, we're not building ships anymore, where did those guys, what happened to them? And they could have had years of security, close to retirement. And then what happens? Yeah. Yeah.
So there's real consequences for, when there's labor shortages or we can't get the work done. And we feel them, tenuously sometimes, but we definitely feel it.
Yeah. A lot of the work, I think, at least working in the shipyard there, it's unseen, it's unknown. You can probably say unappreciated because people just don't know about it. But when there's a problem in the supply chain and you can't buy a car or you can't get a new computer, there's a problem in the supply chain. Then all of a sudden, trucking and shipping and all of that is important, and those people's jobs are all of a sudden they're important. We need those containers, and we need those. Yeah, so
totally. Or if you want to get on the ferry in Seattle and there's no ferry in operation because they all need to go to repair and they're not done yet.
They have to have a regular repair and maintenance schedule because they're working around the clock, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the book is called Hardhat Days, My Reeducation in the Seattle Shipyards.
Yes.
And tell everyone, what was your reeducation in the Seattle shipyards?
Boy, I mentioned just that identity and kind of not having any identity when you don't have a job and you're broke and you're feeling desperate, and then figuring out how to make things work and gain some job skills. And some sensitivity along the way. That was definitely part of that. That's my second education. And then finally, when you have mastered some skills and feel good about yourself, then you have confidence just in who you are, and you can go on to any kind of work and know, hey, I'm going to make this work. So I think that's really the education that took place. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. You start off, maybe you're excited about that first real job, but you find out, no, I certainly got a lot to learn. But over time, you stick with it, you put in a good effort, and then you're rewarded with some good job experience and job skills, and then eventually confidence in who you are. And then that's that quality that really transfers. So that's where the second education came in. Yeah, in a very different setting, but it certainly it served me well, and I'm so glad I had it.
Well, that's awesome. So, okay, one last question. It's just it's something I want to ask lots of people who I talk to, and that is just what does the Pacific Northwest mean to you? What is the Pacific Northwest? What is the spirit of the Pacific Northwest? And whatever you think.
Oh gosh.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, fine. Before 10th grade and finishing high school there in Squim, my dad had been in the military, and so which means we moved like every 2 years.
Okay.
So we lived, I think before Squim High School, I had attended 8 schools, if I remember. So you get to see a lot of the country, but Dad had been stationed to Fort Lewis twice, and I was born in Renton, as it turned out.
Okay.
5 kids in my family. We were all born, Oklahoma, New York, Colorado. They're all different places. When you say where are you from, you get 5 different answers from the Nolan kid. But I always liked Washington, and when I think about the spirit of the Pacific Northwest, all you need to do is look around. I mean, there's these incredible mountains. I mentioned taking the ferry across Elliott Bay, and you look up one way and you've got the Olympic Range, and you look out the other way and there's the Cascades, and the changing of the seasons. And they're not harsh seasons, but they are changing seasons, and you like seeing that. And I think some of the spirit, at least, comes from that. The growth and change and the natural beauty. Gosh, that has an effect on me, at least. That's what I'd say what the Pacific Northwest means.
I couldn't agree more. No, the you can't beat the natural beauty of it. You can't beat it. Pure and simple.
Mm-hmm. And you'll travel, see these wonderful places, but you're always saying, but we live in such an incredible place too. It's always nice coming back because we live in just this great place. So you appreciate it even more.
Absolutely. Once again, I really enjoyed the book. I think, a lot of people need to read this book. It's a really great book. I think lots to learn, a lot of wisdom, and should give people things to think about. And hey, Mike, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to you. This was a good time. I hope your book sales go up, and best of luck in this book. And hey, if you write another one, let me know, and we'll talk about that one too.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Ryan. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Take care. And that was my interview with Mike Nolan. Again, his book, Hardhat Days, My Reeducation in Seattle's Shipyards, is out now. It's a fantastic book, and I truly do think that there is something in it for everybody. So I think you should read this book. It is available on Amazon and Goodreads, as well as other retailers. I'll have some links in the show notes so that you can find the book online. Check out the Instagram page for some pictures of Mike during his Hardhat Days and other information on the book. Thanks again so much for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this interview, and I will be back soon with another episode on Lewis and Clark. Till then, take care and thank you.